Mission log number 248.
First of all, we have to know what the most basic strategies that they use, or the most basic principles of influence might be that would steer us in that direction, so that when we encounter them, we can kind of step back from the situation and say, oh, okay, I need to be careful here that what I want to respond to is the features of the offer, not the features of the way the offer was presented to me.
Welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. Get inspired and live out loud. From love, freedom, and success to having it all. Here's your host, coach, speaker, and shining star, Orion.
Roger, you're looking good.
Hello and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. This is your host, Orion. My guest today is a megastar when it comes to influence. It is someone that was on my wish list for a long time. And it was it's kind of like a milestone when you get to a guest like that and you're like, check, I spoke with the great Robert Cialdini about influence. And I learned a lot. And I'm sure you're going to learn a lot about how to influence your sales and how to influence everything in your life, basically, because influence goes beyond just influencing somebody for a sale. And we're going to talk about what is a sale that is in integrity compared to a sale that is not in integrity, and how you can influence people while staying honest to who you are and just be kind, and how to show up in parties and have people be more intrigued by you. So we're going to learn a lot about the keys to influence. And honestly, this interview was so good. And Robert is, wow, he's so kind. And it was effortless and nice and fun. And I know that you're going to enjoy it a lot. Dr. Robert Cialdini is the New York Times bestselling author of Influence and Pre-Suasion. His book have sold over 7 million copies in 44 different countries. He is known around the world for his scientific work on what leads people to say yes to requests. Many people know him for the Cialdini Principles of Persuasion. Wow, what a treat. Enjoy this one. And now, without further ado, on to the show.
2, 1, 0.
Hey, Robert, and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. It's a true honor having you here on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, I look forward to it.
Yes, before we begin, you're a legend when it comes to influence, and everybody knows who you are. And I just wanted to ask you from your heart, like, how did you discover that passion for influence? What was the entrance? What triggered you so much to focus on that?
Well, even as a young man, I realized that I was an easy mark for the pitches of various kinds of salespeople or fundraisers who would come to my door, and I would find myself in unwanted possession of various items and contributing to causes I had hardly heard of. And it occurred to me that there must be something other than the merits of the offer that got me to say yes. It must have been the way that the offer was presented to me, how the features were delivered to me in some sort of psychologically effective way that enchanted me or swept me along into yes. And I thought to myself, well, that's interesting. That would be worth studying. Not just out of self-defense, right? But because other people would be interested in that, and I'm interested in it myself. And that's how it began.
I totally understand. Actually, this is why a long time ago, I used to do fitness. And one of the reasons why I got into fitness is because I wanted to be fit.
Yes, right.
Sometimes we learn and teach the thing that we want to know for ourselves.
Exactly. And I'm forever intrigued by the process of persuasion, how it works, how we can employ it, how we can defend ourselves against it. And I think I'm not alone in that. Most of the people I know want to want to know both of those things, how to harness the principles and also how to reject and deflect those when they're being used on us in an unwelcome way.
Yes, I have the same type of fascination with influencing people's minds, not necessarily for sales, but to give them breakthroughs. So I studied hypnosis and I studied NLP, and it started as a hobby. And when a long time ago, when I was a personal trainer, I used to stretch my clients on the table and put embedded command in their minds while they were in a relaxed state. You are feeling great about your body. You are getting better and better. I used to make sure to notice the way they speak to themselves or about themselves.
Yeah.
And I noticed that the conversation we have are doing, in my mind, they did even more than, and I was a good trainer, but I thought the mindset, the way I spoke to their subconscious mind did more than the training, or it was just a wonderful combination. And that's how slowly I left and I became a coach and focused more on how to influence people's minds.
That's really interesting because I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Pre-Suasion, and it's about arranging for people to be in a state of mind that is aligned with the direction you would like them to go before you ever offer a communication or an appeal or a message designed to take them there. If they're already in a mindset, then it becomes much easier. I mean, a good example is, I don't know if you're a wine drinker, but if you go into a wine shop and the proprietor is playing German music, you're more likely to buy a German wine.
Oh, wow.
If it's French music, you're more likely to buy a French vintage. If it's Italian or Spanish, the same sort of thing. So where you are at the top of mind determines the direction you're going to take for your next step very often.
So it feels like we're almost not in control. We are being bombarded by advertisements. We are bombarded by news that wants to take us to different directions. So how do we protect ourselves from that powerful influence that is so smart? And people spend years learning how to press our buttons and tap into our subconscious mind. So how do we defend ourselves from all that?
Well, first of all, we have to know what the most basic strategies that they use, or the most basic principles of influence might be that would steer us in that direction, so that when we encounter them, we can kind of step back from the situation and say, oh, okay, I need to be careful here that what I want to respond to is the features of the offer, not the features of the way the offer was presented to me.
Mm.
So that's a very important thing. In fact, at the end of each chapter of my book, Influence, I have a section called Defense. How do you recognize and resist when somebody is pushing you in a particular direction in a way that's inauthentic? A lot of the time, we do want information from people who honestly tell us what the authorities are saying about a particular topic, or what the largest selling or fastest growing product on the market is, or whether there's true scarcity and an opportunity is dwindling away from us. We want to know that. It's not that we always want to reject those kinds of fundamental ways to decide. It's we want to reject those that are counterfeited, that are fabricated, where people are not being straight with us about whether there's genuine scarcity in the situation or true authority voices speaking in behalf of their position and so on. That's the thing that I've learned to be alert to and then guard myself against.
Yes. What's the difference between ethical influence and fabricated influence?
It is the ability to, as a communicator, point to something that is inherently there in the situation that normally steers us correctly. Let's say, again, expert opinions on a particular topic. If we have those available and we can share those with people, then their uncertainty that that's the correct way to proceed goes down. And they want that information. I would want that information if I was trying to decide what to take step A or B. And you were able to show me that here's what the experts say, let's say about fitness, that would be something I would thank you for. It's not something I would want to resist, because you would be informing me into a choice rather than deceiving me. But of course, if somebody concocted those expert testimonials or wasn't truthful in the extent to which the experts really believe a particular direction is the right one, that's the person we have to object to, not just in the moment. That is to say, no, I'm not going there. I think we have to then go online and tell other people about the unethical conduct. I think we have to, just out of a desire to make sure that we're dealing with honest brokers of information, we should reveal those people who have not been honest with us, and we should badge those people who have been honest with us online.
Can you explain the power of asking for advice versus asking for an opinion?
Yes. So very often, if we've got an idea, let's say in outline form or a blueprinted, we want to advance that idea, perhaps inside an organization up the line, so that our boss or an immediate manager would want to follow up on it. We want to get the buy-in from our colleagues first, to be sure that we can say that I've tested this out with Jim and Janet and Jane, and they all support it. So how do we get people to give us buy-in to the ideas we really want to make our own and employ to further goals that we have? What we typically do is we'll show those folks outline, a draft of our idea, and ask for their feedback on it. But here's the mistake we make. We ask for their opinion. And when we ask for an opinion, we get a critic. We get somebody who takes a half step back from us and goes inside themselves, separates from us, goes inside themselves and aligns themselves with everybody else against us. That's how they're thinking. Okay, I'm going to judge this opinion. I'm going to judge this idea, and I'll represent myself and everybody else versus this idea. If instead we change one word, and instead of asking for their opinion, we ask for their advice, this time we get a partner instead of a critic.
That makes a lot of sense, because when you're asking for an opinion, people look inward and they think about themselves, and they want to be smart and they want to sound smart, and the ego kicks in and they just want to give you their opinion and talk. And they almost like talk down at you, sharing their opinion, or not talk down and they really want to sound smart, be smart. It's a self monologue. And like you said, when you ask them for advice, it becomes a dialogue. People really like helping other people, and they look at you differently when you ask for help and when you ask for advice.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Forever appreciate the wisdom of those who ask for our advice." So what we've got is we've got a partner now. We've got somebody who stands with us on that opinion, who's helping us against everybody else's view of it, right? Our idea, our initiative, and so on. There's an old saying, when we ask for advice, we're usually looking for an accomplice. Well, here's what the science says. If we get that advice, we get that accomplice.
Why did you switch from helping customers to helping marketers?
Well, when I wrote the first edition of my book, Influence, it was for consumers, how to recognize and resist these principles. And the feedback I got, the letters and calls and so on from people who read the book said, that's great. That really helped us. But I would really like to be more influential in my life.
Mm-hmm.
With my family, with my friends, with my colleagues, with people at work. Can you steer me in that direction too? And that's what caused subsequent editions to be more focused on ethical influence, creating change in others, but doing so ethically so that all sides would benefit.
Yes. What are the keys to influence? Can you walk us through the 7 keys to influence?
Yes. The first is the principle of reciprocation that exists in all human societies. It says we are obligated to give back to others who have first given to us. So if you invite me to a party, I should invite you to one of mine. If you remember my birthday with a gift, I should remember yours with a gift. And if you do me a favor, I owe you a favor. And I'll say very simply, people say yes to those they owe. So there's a very interesting implication here. If you go into a room where you want to be influential with the people there, your first question to yourself should not be, who can help me here? Your first question should be, whom can I most help here? Whose circumstances can I elevate? Whose outcomes can I enhance? And as a result of this rule that we have all been socialized into from childhood, that person is going to want to help you when you need it. It's a beautiful system for arranging for the exchange of various kinds of resources and services and opportunities to further one another's outcomes by starting first. There was a study done in McDonald's locations in Colombia and Brazil. And what the researchers did was to arrange for every family that came into the location to receive a balloon for each child. Half of the families got that balloon as they were leaving. The kids got the balloon as they left the door. The other half, the kids got the balloon as they entered. The parents bought 20% more food when the balloon came first.
Wow.
And inside that 20% increase in food order was 25% increase in coffee orders. That wasn't for the kids. You know, since you just told me that you've got a year and a half old.
Yeah, a year and 7, yes.
Yeah. Any other kids?
No, he's my first.
Well, here's what you know. If I do a favor for your baby, I've done a favor for you.
Oh my God, you'll get everything.
We'll come to that principle last. It's the principle I'm calling unity now. If I do something for someone inside your we group, the group that you identify with, and say, this is of me. These people are of me. Everything, all the barriers to influence come down. But anyway, that's the first principle, reciprocation. Next one is liking. Now, you wouldn't be surprised. None of the people who are listening to this program would be surprised that we prefer to say yes to those we know and like. No surprise there. But here's 2 small things that we can do to significantly increase the rapport that people will feel with us while we are interacting with them. First is to point to genuine similarities between us, real parallels that exist. The second is to give genuine compliments.
I do that not to influence. I kind of say what I feel most of the time.
So you do that automatically, right? You give praise and compliments to people who deserve it. Mm-hmm. That's my biggest weakness.
You know, you're such a wonderful person, and I'm so grateful you're on the show, and I'm really enjoying listening to you right now. And I'm genuinely saying that.
Well, good. And that warms my heart, genuinely. And you know what? I used to catch myself. Let's say, I'm an academic and a researcher. And I would be in a research meeting with my graduate students, and I would hear myself say, geez, that was a smart thing that Brad just said. Or, oh, how Rosanna just characterized the next step we should take was brilliant. And I would say it to myself, and I would lose all of the goodwill that would come from that honest compliment. These people deserved it. Why was I hoarding it? It has to do with something about the way I was raised, I'm sure. But anyway, so now I specifically do what you do automatically. If I hear myself say something about another that's admirable or commendable, I move it from my mind to my tongue. And I can't tell you how much better the interactions become as a result of that.
That's fantastic. I have a question about the first one, reciprocation. You said when I enter a room, instead of asking who can help me, you ask how can I help people? And I don't know, self-confidence, or maybe I'm shy. I enter a room, especially with super influential people like you, and I'm like, I don't think I can do anything for them. They're so amazing and successful and wonderful. And what can I do for them?
Yeah, well, one thing that you can do is to spend a little bit of time and talk with them about what is going on in their lives, what challenges they might be having. Or you said you were into fitness for a while. You might go up to somebody and talk about that and some hints that you could provide for them or their family members or their kids or whatever that would help based on what you already know. That establishes yet the third principle of influence, which is authority.
Mm-hmm.
You not only give them something and they want to give back to you as a result, but you have demonstrated that you're somebody who is expert on the topic, knowledgeable on the topic, and now they see you as an expert in addition to being a generous person.
I can tell you, I am very knowledgeable. I studied from the best in the world, and yet I come to a room and I'm like, I don't talk. I think I was raised to not brag, and it's nicer to be modest and be a good girl.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
so here's a piece of advice. It's not my opinion. It's my advice. Do what I did with compliments, except do it with the thing that you are underrepresenting in yourself. Make it a goal to interact with people and honestly inform them of who you are, what you do now, what you've done in the past, just in terms of a sociable conversation. Those things will come up. And here's something that helps in that regard. It has to do with reciprocity. If you reveal something about yourself, the rule for reciprocity says people will reveal something about themselves.
ah,
And now you have an exchange of information where people really get a chance to know you. You get a chance to know them. And that's a sure way to build bonds where people are revealing. It's called self-disclosure. And there's a very strong piece of evidence in the literature of behavioral science. Disclosure is a reciprocal thing. People give back the amount, the level of disclosure that they've received to somebody who's provided it.
So what's the line between sharing and oversharing and maybe sounding like I brag?
I think the key is you just describe your background rather than announce it or proclaim it as something important. And the best way I know to do that is in the context of a story. People don't counter-argue stories. Stories just are. They counter-argue claims. They counter-argue assertions, but not stories. Tell stories about yourself that reveal your competence.
Okay. If you were me, what type of stories would you share?
Well, you have to tell me a little bit more about what you said to me earlier, that you've done a lot of knowledge acquisition in your life.
Yes, I studied from the best in the world. I did everything, Tony Robbins, Landmark, hundreds and hundreds of workshops in all kinds of anything self-development or in a lot of relationship, masterminds, and I was in Genius Network. And it was just like my husband and I, we used to travel all the time and just constantly go to different conferences and learn from incredible people. I traveled to India. I did some spiritual work there.
Here's what I would recommend.
Mm-hmm.
And I should tell you a secret of mine. I'm very awkward at parties, same as you. And here's what I've learned that works. It's to reveal something about myself. Precisely that.
Mm-hmm.
I say to somebody, at parties, I'm really not good at parties. It's hard for me, even though, I have a university position.
But everybody comes to you. How can that be? Everybody comes to you. Is like, can I shake your hand? Can I talk to you?
I don't initiate, but I can say I'm awkward at parties. It's difficult for me to do it, even though I have a degree and even though I wrote a book, and it's still difficult. So in telling that story, I learn about my background and credentials, but also they will say something in return. They will reveal something about them. And now we have a basis to talk, tell other stories about ourselves.
Yes, that's good. So the first one was reciprocation.
Second one is liking.
And then
Next one is authority. Again, if we can show people that the idea we have or the direction we think they should take is aligned with what the experts are saying on it, they will reduce their uncertainty and be more likely to step forward.
Can you give me a few more examples on how to build authority?
Well, here's one. If you have a meeting with people on a particular topic, you can send them your LinkedIn page, or you can say, I'm very glad we'll have a chance to meet on the topic of such and such. My background and experience regarding that are as follows. And you can send them a copy of your resume. You don't want to do it in person because of the thing that you were talking about earlier. You don't want to seem like a braggart.
Mm-hmm.
You just want to be informative. Just give people information, true information about yourself. That's one thing. And then here's another. And this is the one that most people get wrong. Let's say you have a particular idea that you want to further among a group or with a particular person. You'd like that person to adopt this idea. And what we typically are trained to do is to talk about all of the favorable aspects, all of the most positive features of that idea, the most compelling reasons to undertake it. And then if there are drawbacks, if there are weaknesses, all ideas have strengths and weaknesses. Then at the very end, after we've got people leaning in our direction, we mention the drawback associated. This may take a longer time than other ways of approaching things, but here's the key. The weakness should go much earlier because it establishes that we are not just knowledgeable about the strengths of this idea. We know the pros and the cons. And secondly, it establishes us as credible sources of information, people who are willing to be honest enough to provide the weaknesses as well as the strengths. And here's what the research shows. If you mention a weakness early in your case, not the very first thing, you don't sit down with somebody and say, first, let me tell you all the things that are wrong with me, my ideas, my products, my services. No, but early, people say to themselves, wow, I'm dealing with an honest broker of information who knows the whole story, the pros and the cons. What's the next thing she's going to say? They listen differently to the next thing you say. And that's the place for your strongest argument.
Nice.
Immediately after you've mentioned a weakness, then you provide the strongest argument that just sweeps away the weakness. But what remains is the perception of you as an honest broker of information.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So that's the principle of authority, how you can get authority to work on your side. Here's one other that we've learned recently in the research on persuasion science. If you have an expert voice that you can point to in an appeal that you're going to make, and you say, this person, this knowledge expert believes what I am recommending as well, you can multiply that authority's impact by multiplying the number of authorities. If you can get multiple authorities, if you can marshal the evidence that multiple authorities are recommending or congruent with what it is that you are recommending, that works better than a single authority.
A very long time ago, I took a course in how to be on TV, and I did some TV appearances. And what I've been taught in my pitch is to start with Oprah Winfrey and just say all kinds of celebrity name and how they relate to my ideas, and then speak about my idea. Because the moment I put them in the same sentence, I'm elevating my status.
Right.
And people connect us. So this is a little similar. It's just that you bring some expert opinion or opinions into and relate them to your idea, and then it elevates the status of your idea.
That's really a bullseye observation. And I would just add that the way you described it is exactly right. You do it up front so that that authority aura infuses everything you say. A lot of times I see people saying, oh, by the way, this is something that Elon Musk believes, or, oh, yes, and this is what Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett believe. Why would you wait to the middle or end of your presentation? Why not make that part of the aura that infuses everything that you have to say right from the outset?
Yeah.
And then we're marching through the principles. And the next one is what we call social proof. It's not only do people reduce their uncertainty about what they should do next by listening to or watching what the authorities are saying and doing, they do the same thing for their peers. What are the people around me like me saying or doing or experiencing with regard to a particular idea or product or service, let's say? That information that you've got a number of people who have already, like you, who have already experienced something positive from following the particular recommendation that you're making, that also reduces people's uncertainty. Oh, this is something for me too. I can do this and probably come out with positive outcomes as well. For example, there was a lovely study that was done in China. It shows you the cross-cultural reach of this idea of social proof. Managers at a string of restaurants in Beijing tried a little technique to increase the purchase of certain kinds of items on their menu. They put a little asterisk next to those items, and the purchase of those dishes increased by 13 to 20%, depending on which dish it was, but 13 to 20%. Now, what did the asterisk stand for? It wasn't what we usually see on menus. This is a specialty of the house, or this is what the chef is recommending for this evening. It wasn't that. It was, this is one of our most popular items. And each one became more popular for its popularity. So once again, as communicators, if we can honestly give information that what we are recommending has been and is being chosen by a lot of other people like them, and it's a popular choice, that causes people to get off the sidelines and into the game with us. Stop dithering around and say, okay, well, then this is probably a choice I can make and do well, and step forward and act.
Before we move to the next key, can you share a story about a social proof about people that read your book or went to your lectures? And I'm sure you have about 1 million of those, but something that is really special where people got your information and it really changed their lives?
I'll tell you a social proof-based example that allowed people to want to buy my books for their teams. This was a manager who wrote to me and said, I was in a bookstore and I have a sales team and we were struggling. We weren't making our numbers. And I was looking for a book that I could buy for each of my salespeople. And then we would talk about the ideas in the book at weekly meetings. This is what I like to do. I saw your book on the shelf and I didn't know if I wanted to choose it versus some of the other books were available. But then I looked on the back and it said 3 million sold. And I said, this must be something that works. He said, I bought it. We go through each chapter week by week, a chapter a week. We talk about it and our sales numbers have skyrocketed. Okay. So it had a big impact on this guy's life because he then got to be promoted from regional sales manager to national sales manager because of a principle of social proof that was on my book.
Are you surprised by how incredible and how well your book did? Your books, both of them, like, are you in shock or in awe at your success?
I never suspected it. But I'm grateful for it. But I think I know the reason. It's a decision I made early on to look not at which principles of influence worked in particular settings, sales versus marketing versus management versus public relations versus charity fundraising. I looked at which principles worked in each of those. Which were the principles that across the range of professions designed to get people to say yes to them? Which principles were used in common across all of them? And that was the evidence. So I think in retrospect, when I look back, it was that choice, not looking at the differences between the various kinds of approaches and industries and professions, but the commonalities. That was the key. And if all of them use these principles successfully, before I ever wrote about them, I just learned about them, that they were using these principles. And by the way, I did that by being an undercover spy. I went into their training programs with disguised identity, disguised intent. I listened to what they said worked across this range of influence professions. And there were only this very small number that worked. And each one is a chapter in the book.
Nice. So we had reciprocation, we had likings, we had giving genuine compliments, authority, and social proof. So we got 2 more.
Yeah. The next one is commitment and consistency. The idea that people want to be consistent with what they have already committed themselves to. Now, what do we mean by a commitment? In the language of behavioral science, it's something that you have already said or done on a particular topic, a position that you have taken on it. So people who have made even a small step in a particular direction, as a communicator, if a communicator can get them to take a small step in that direction, those people will be significantly more likely to take a larger step as long as it's consistent with what they've already done. There was a study done in a restaurant in Chicago, Gordon's Restaurant. And this guy, Gordon Sinclair, was a student of behavioral science. And he was having a problem with no-shows, people who would call, book a table, and then they'd fail to appear. They just didn't show up, called them no-show. He had 30% of them were failing to show up. And he went and listened to what his receptionist said when she took a reservation. She said, "Thank you for calling Gordon's. If you have to change or cancel your reservation, please call." He asked her to change 2 words. Instead of saying, "Please call," he asked her to say, "Will you please call?" and pause. and wait for people to say, sure, of course, glad to. And that was their commitment.
Commitment.
And no-shows at Gordon's restaurant dropped by 67% and never went back up.
Wow.
People want to be consistent with what they have already said or done. So if we ask questions like that, there's a study that showed if you ask people to help out with a survey for which they get no compensation at all, only 29% do. But if you first say, excuse me, they've stopped people on the street. Excuse me, do you consider yourself a helpful person? Well, everybody said yes. And then the marketer said, well, could you help us with this marketing survey? Now 75%. So a powerful principle of influence.
And what is consistency?
Consistency is a willingness to be aligned with what you have previously said or done. So not to deviate from it without some good reason, like, oh, well, I got new information in the situation that I didn't have before. But people don't want to be seen as inconsistent, because what we think of an inconsistent person is a flip-flopper or wishy-washy or even dishonest. You say one thing and do another. So people don't want to see themselves that way, and they don't want others to see them that way.
We just bought a car yesterday and returned it today. And one of the reasons I think that, besides the fact that the car, even though it was a fancy car and it was really nice to think about it as driving in this nice car, there was something about the salesperson and my interactions with him and him saying, like, he says one thing and then I caught him say another thing later on. So it seems like he was kind of wishy-washy, kind of lying to me to try to push me to buy it. And I think this was part of the why we decided to return it.
Because you just couldn't trust that what he was saying, that the results would be consistent.
Right.
Your experience would be consistent with his promises for you.
Right. I like honest people, and I like to buy from honest people. It's something that is very important to me.
Somebody once did a study of the most positively rated trait in the English language, right? What is it? Is it intelligence, altruism? Is it helpfulness? It's trustworthiness.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we value. And so we want to be that person in the eyes of those around us and in our own eyes.
Yes, for sure. I wish we had more time, but I want to be respectful of your time. And this was so far unbelievable and awesome and just fantastic. And thank you for sharing all that with us. But before we say goodbye for now, I have two more questions for you, Robert.
Sure.
The first one is, what are your 3 top tips to living a stellar life? And the second one is, where can people find you?
Let me take the second one first. And that is, our website is influenceatwork.com, and they can get all kinds of information about what we offer. The first one, I'm going to take it a little differently. I'm going to give my top tip that has 3 positive consequences.
Good.
And it is, go into every situation where you are meeting people for the first time by thinking the best of them, thinking the best about them. That will allow you to be generous with them. And that generosity will have 3 very positive downstream consequences. First of all, they will like you because you're a generous person. Secondly, by the principle of reciprocation, they will be generous to you. And finally, by the principle of commitment and consistency, after they have seen themselves being generous to you, giving you resources, opportunities, information that will help you, they will see themselves as having made a commitment to your well-being. Will be consistent with it into the future.
Beautiful. Robert, thank you so much. I really appreciated our conversation. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, and thank you for taking the time to to be with us.
I have to say I enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, listeners. Remember to think the best of people and use those incredible keys of influence that Robert shared with us today and use it for good and be kind and be genuine and loving and caring and have a stellar life. This is Orion. Till next time. Thank you for joining me on my mission to light people up and change lives around the world. I hope today's conversation inspires you to step up, go after the life of your dreams, and be who you want to be. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to go to stellarlifepodcast.com for show notes, transcripts, and other cool stuff. And please subscribe, review, and help spread the word by sharing us on Facebook and Twitter. Have a lovely day, and I'll catch you on the next episode.